All right, today's lesson, we're going to learn a third way of solving quadratic equations, equations that have a squared in them. This is a quadratic equation. That way is going to be completing the square. But let's hold off for a few minutes here and let's just review the other two ways we've learned to solve these types of equations. Number one, when possible, factoring is probably the quickest way to do it. And I actually put one up here that does factor. So when something factors, pretty simple here. We just we're looking for what numbers would multiply to negative 12 that would add up to negative 4. And those numbers are, we're going to put x and x to make x squared. And then it's going to be minus 6 plus 2. Let you guys think about that for a second. That should be becoming old news to you. And then we set each of those individually equal to 0 and solve. And the answers are x equals 6, x equals negative 2. So there's method number one. You know, that method is great, except the problem with it is what if right here, see where I'm highlighting this 12 right here, what if I put a 13 there instead? All of a sudden we won't be able to do this problem that way. So the second way that we learned, I will put on a new slide here. The second way is by the quadratic formula. So I'm actually going to solve the same problem. Even though we knew we could do it by factoring, I'm going to solve the same problem using the quadratic formula, which is x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And for this problem, a equals 1, b equals negative 4, and c equals negative 12. So we're just going to put all those numbers into that formula. X equals negative 4 plus or minus square root negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 12. All over 2 times 1. So x equals positive 4 plus or minus square root 16. We have plus 48 all over 2, which is x equals 4 plus or minus, what do we got there, 64 over 2. And normally we would just leave it like that. We were talking about that on the last lesson, that if, you know, whatever that square root is, it is what it is. We just kind of leave this as our exact answer to the problem. But you'll notice here that's a perfect square root, so we need to keep going with that one. So that equals 4 plus or minus 8 over 2, which equals 4 plus 8, which is 12, divided by 2 is 6. And the other answer is 4 minus 8, which is negative 4, divided by 2, which is negative 2. So there's our two answers. X equals 6 and negative 2. If we go back to the last slide, or if you just go back and, actually if you go back in the video, you'll see that that was the exact same answers as when we did it by factoring. All right, so that's just a little review. Now, let's actually do the new lesson. The new lesson, I'm going to solve the same problem a third way. Okay, so x squared minus 4x minus 12 equals 0. And we're going to solve this by completing the square. And that'll make sense here in a minute why they call it that. All right, for the first one though, just kind of hang in there, maybe take some notes on it, and we'll put it all together at the end. Step one. Step one is going to be that we don't want this negative 12. You know, there's a negative 12 right here, and I want to replace that negative 12 with another number here to fit in with my little trick I'm going to do. So we're going to take the negative 12 and we're going to move it to the other side as positive 12. And then we're going to put a number here that works perfectly for this method of completing the square. And the trick is you take half of whatever this number is right here. You don't even need to worry about what the sign is, just that value right there. Half of that would be 2, and then square it. So half of 4 is 2, and 2 squared is 4. And we're going to always add that number right here. But if you stare at that, you realize, why would I be allowed to just add 4 whenever I feel like it here? I cannot do that. I can't change the equation illegally. So if I'm going to do that, which I am, then I have to come over here and also add 4. As long as I do that, I'm fine. Now, the reason I'm doing this is if you follow that little trick, and we'll do it a few more times to get the feel for it, then this quadratic right here becomes the same. We're going to factor it, and it's going to be the same factor twice. Watch. It's going to be -2 and -2, because 2 times 2 is 4, and -2 plus -2 is -4. In fact, just check it out. You can see right now that if I FOIL this, we get x squared right there. We get -2x and another -2x, which makes -4x. And then we get -2 times -2, positive 4. And then on the right side, we just add the numbers together. We get 16. Now, what's so cool about completing the square is that since these are the exact same factor, which will work that way every time if you do this right, this will be the same as that. They're matching factors. That's what the trick was. That's why we added 4 here. It turns, when you do that trick, it makes these the same. And the reason that's good is we can write it like this. And that allows us to do a third method here, which is square root both sides. And so the square root and the square cancel each other out, and we're left with x minus 2 equals. And whenever we square root both sides of an equation, we don't just get 4 over here, we get plus or minus 4. And then finally, we're just going to add 2. So we have plus or minus 4 plus 2. Because I added this 2 right here. I got rid of that and moved it over to the other side as plus 2. And then finally, positive 4 plus 2 is 6, and negative 4 plus 2 is -2. And we have the same answers for the third time. Isn't that fun? All right, let's do another nice, simple, clean one, but just a little smoother, a little faster, so you guys can realize this isn't that big a deal. Step 1 is get the constant. The constant is always the number that doesn't have a variable. Move that to the other side of the equation. So we're going to do that by adding 16. We have it over there. Notice I leave a little space here because I'm going to replace that 16 that was there. I moved it over there. I'm going to replace it with something that helps me with completing the square. And that number is always, it's always half of this number, so half of 6, which is 3, and then squared. 3 times 3, 9. So I'm going to put plus 9 right here. But I can't add 9 there unless I add 9 to the other side as well. And the reason we're doing that is if you do it right, then these are always the exact same factor. In this case, it's x minus 3, x minus 3. And on the right side, you have 25. If you have the same factor twice, like we do here, then you can write that in this form instead. And that allows us to solve by square root method. The square here and the square root cancel each other out, so you're left with just x minus 3 equals plus or minus 5. Whenever you square root both sides of an equation, you must, it's not just 5 there, it's 5 and -5. In fact, let me take a second to have you realize why that works that way. Let's give a real simple problem here. If I had x squared equals 4, and I wanted to solve that by square rooting, I would square root, and I'd have x equals, and the answer would be plus or minus 2. Now, I think we all hopefully understand that if you look back at that equation again, here's the original equation, 2 squared is 4. That's true. But we can't ignore the fact that negative 2 times negative 2 also equals positive 4. So that's why the answer isn't just 2 right here. The answer is also negative 2. And that's just the way it works. Every time you square root both sides of an equation, you have to put plus or minus there. Or in other words, you have 2 answers to that problem. The positive version of it, 2 squared, and negative 2 squared. So that works over here. Even though this looks a little messier, it's the same idea. We have to, when we square root right here, and we all are going to look at that and think, well, yeah, the square root of 25 is 5. We can't forget that negative 5 times negative 5 is also positive 25. All right, then we just solve for x. We get plus or minus 5 plus 3, and that equals positive 5 plus 3 is 8, and negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2. There's the answers to that problem. And yes, we could have done that problem by factoring. We could have done it by quadratic formula, but today's lesson, completing the square. All right, let's do it again. This time, it's not going to be as pretty. Okay, you can see here, this problem, you would not be able to factor it. The only numbers that multiply to 25 are either 5 and 5 or 25 and 1, and neither of those are going to create this 8 in the middle. So we could use the quadratic formula from the other day. No, we can always use that too, but let's do this one by completing the square. Step 1, we move the constant to the right side. So the 25 moves over to the other side. Step 2, take half of this number and square it. Half of 8 is 4. 4 times 4, 16. So we're going to put plus 16 here. But we can't put plus 16 unless we put plus 16 over there as well. When we do this correctly, this will be a perfect square. That means that it'll be the same factor twice. In this case, it's just x minus 4, x minus 4. On the other side, we have, just add the numbers together, you get 41. Since these are the same factor, we write it like this, and then we square root both sides. We get x minus 4 equals plus or minus square root 41. See, that time the square root of 41, we can't actually get the number for that, so we just leave it plus or minus square root of 41. And then finally we solve, we go x equals 4 plus or minus square root 41. That's it. Now that one looks a little more like the answers you get to quadratic formulas. Okay. These can get a little messier, and there's lots more I can share with you, but we're going to keep the video a little simple, and you know, anything beyond that we'll either do in class or I'll make another video. But that's the basics of completing the square with some, you know, simpler starting problems. They will, you know, this number here, if you think about it, I've made this number even today for every problem, because if you have to take half that number when you square it, and if that was an odd number and you take half, you're going to have fractions. And we're going to deal with that, but we don't need to deal with it quite yet. All right, see you soon. Good luck with the homework. Work hard. Be nice. See ya.